there, hello. I guess if you're coming here, you know that we are here to talk about our experience both as game designers and also as game players. Self-introduction, I am Justin Kuiper. If you know me from my work on video games, it is probably from either Idle Manager or Necro Barista. And Patrick, meanwhile, is far too accomplished for me to summarize everything that he's worked on, but I'll let him do his best attempts.
For video games, I'm something of a debutante when it comes to design and coding, but I made Starfighter/Stockfighter back in the day, particularly the trading levels of it, and then more recently made Isekai game for a different conference that was held here in the ancient AI history of 8 whole months ago.
Actually, do we want to start by talking about that a little bit? Your experience vibe coding a game?
I hate the word vibe coding. I was making actual engineering decisions while doing this, because in the ancient AI history of 8 months ago, you still read what it produced.
Remind us what model that was, just to sort of like give us the stamp.
So the tech stack was primarily Claude Code. There were the game actually used AI models to do content generation and playing, and so it was the most current versions of GPT and Claude back in the day. The majority of the content was created by Sonnet. It used image generation, and then the primary Claude code was Opus falling back to Sonnet when they ran out of capacity, which might or might not have been addressed at some time in the past. I wouldn't know. So Isekai game was this idea to one, let's see if it's possible to create a like fun computer game in a month using modern coding tools. Answer, totally possible, and I think that changes the economics of video games in interesting ways, both for people who are kind of hobbyists or semi-professional at this and for the real gaming industry. Two, can you do a game that has a lot of story content in a way where that story actually has authorial intent and sounds like there is some soul behind it, while also having a lot of the words be written by AI? And based on feedback from the players from it, I think the answer to that is also a yes. What the actual game was a largely text-based game where you would play essentially Dungeons and Dragons with the serial numbers filed off. I told it to not put D&D in any code commits so I don't get sued. But D&D with the serial numbers filed off. With your character sheet, you would go through a Slay the Spire style map, essentially trying to make your character stronger in a roguelike fashion. And then there would be boss encounters at the end of each of the 3 acts of the game, where the encounter was not, here's a monster, fight it, but something more akin to a puzzle. And so the centerpiece of the game, because I never got around to finishing Acts 2 and 3, was an encounter Plague Town, where it was essentially a pandemic-themed murder mystery in a fantasy world, trying to find out why this village of Limestone Hollow was affected by a plague that was killing anyone and stop it before either you or the village died out. I consider it one of my best works of engineering, which is odd because I did so little of the coding for it.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious as to whether you think that, obviously, like, you were using the LLM both for coding and then also for the content generation, and like, of those 2 tasks, which do you think it was, I guess, like carrying more of the weight, like relative to like what you were doing in the moment, and also like relative to what you would have had to do in a counterfactual world where you did not have LLMs?
So relative to Sonnet 4.6 or whatever we were on in August of last year, I am a much better writer of D&D-esque fantasy scenes. However, I cannot write 250,000 words of D&D fantasy scenes in a month. And Sonnet manifestly can. Like, if you've got money, Anthropic has tokens, let's go. And some of them were surprisingly and genuinely moving. And one in particular, there's too much context to explain it, but the model pulled from its random list of names a name that happened to be my daughter in a heroic role when this character is putting herself in opposition to duly constituted legal authority in a case where that is maximally morally required of the character. And there were 3 notes in that scene. I won't spoil it for you, but I wept for the beauty of it. On the coding side, they were less fantastic in last August, by which I mean they were still very fantastic. The the encounter logic, the core, like, okay, you're going to make a choice, and then you're going to roll, against roll a 20-sided die against a DC of 16 with a bonus because you're a paladin, and you get advantage because you made this other choice in a previous encounter, yada, yada, yada. That logic for quote-unquote simple encounters was relatively simple. For quote-unquote complex encounters, like this, multi-turn murder mystery sort of scenario where you would be making hundreds of actions in a row, it got quite complicated. And I thought, as the scenario designer here, it might be good to express this complex encounter in form of a DSL, so I can decouple the words that get shown to the player in the case of success or failure from here's what I want the rolls to look like, and here's the special rules that I want to happen in certain of the rooms of this map, let's say. And so I sketched out in a markdown document what the DSL would look like, and told Claude, please take a crack at doing this DSL. Because I'd forgotten how to do DSLs in Ruby. It's been 10 years since I did my last one. And it almost worked on the first try. And then I said, wow, that's really interesting. I'd had a 4-hour-long discussion with a standard Claude instance on what I wanted the design and the emotional high notes of the Plague experience to be, and asked it some questions about pandemic preparedness to figure out what the fiction of the game was. And then at the bottom of that discussion, I said, hey, just distill this into a design document for the programming team that actually has to make this happen. And then I passed that design document straight over to Claude Code and said, okay, you have the DSL, you have the design document, make it go, please. And within one 12-hour workday of that, we had the actual playable final product, which people were able to successfully win. Another interesting thing that happened, so if you build a CLI for your video game, you can have AIs play your video game. They don't have good taste in terms of like, play through the game and tell me if it's fun, please. But they do have good taste in play through the game and note if at any time you are surprised in the correspondence between the action you take and what happens next in a negative way. And this shook out so many scenario bugs. Like, I punch him in the face. He thanks you for your loyalty. Hey, Patrick, I don't think that's the one we wanted. Fixed. And then there was, at one point, a graph traversal that needed to happen. So this village that has the plague happening, it sure would suck if the location that you have to go to can't actually be reached by a player doing the correct things in order. And it sure would suck if any of the various encounters around town are unreachable. And so I asked it, so are all the encounters actually reachable given an achievable game state? And it said, well, yeah, I checked the design document. They're all supposed to be reachable. Not the question I asked. Do like a full-blown CS 101 graph traversal of this, please, and tell me exactly like what is required to get to all of them. And then play in the CLI for as many incarnations of a character as it takes until you've seen, it's not possible to see every path because there would be billions, but make sure that you've seen like every location with an actual character being able to move to it. And $5 later it said, so slight problem, the fountain, you would expect after the fountain has been emptied to be able to go to this other location. But you can't, and it's because of a typo. So should I fix that typo, boss? And I'm like, yes, thank you. I really felt like I was seeing the future and doing a lot of this development.
Yeah, what you were describing with like letting Claude play through the game brought to mind. I believe Claude has played through Pokemon at this point, and this is something that I think that there are a lot of I don't know, AI bears or just people who are like skeptical of AI for reasons that I'm not skeptical of it, who would say like, some mixture of, congratulations, Claude, you have achieved only what many 7-year-olds have. And then there's another perspective that's like, wow, now that we have AI to play our video games for us, we will no longer be burdened with this. I would say to that latter person, have you ever been a QA tester? Because I think that there are, this is a hat that I briefly had to wear. And the process of being a QA tester is not what you experience as the consumer when you are experiencing the joy of playing a video game. And so I think the fact that like Claude can sort of take a Pokemon ROM and then play through it and perhaps report things about his experience may be a good thing, especially because this is like actually like a very specific domain in which like there are many Pokemon ROM hacks where there are like these fan-made games. And then, of course, there are hundreds, literally hundreds, perhaps thousands of people who say, I made a Pokemon fan game, and now I would like people to play through it and give me your opinions, please. And it is much like a lot of people growing onto the internet and say, I made a thing, please look at it, please give me 50 hours of your time to play test this thing. And perhaps it is useful for those people to have a robot that they can say, I actually do want you to do the thing where you beat your head against this thing for 50 hours and tell me what you think. Or tell me if there was an inappropriate level of head beating required during that time.
I think we as an industry, and I guess I'll speak for the video game industry, although have I been a member? Maybe. We did a disservice to generations of testers saying, we'll pay you to play video games, where that was bluntly a lie, where the job is actually an Excel sheet of tests, and we are using you to be a for loop over different iterations of the game doing this Excel sheet where you are turning the human description of a test in the Excel sheet into a series of controller presses and then recording what you see on screen. The models are extremely capable of doing this. They're capable of doing it in a for loop. They're capable of doing it in a for loop after every release of the game. They're capable of doing it in a for loop after every push to the game if you want it to. Like, it's just tokens. The world has a lot of them. This makes the video game development process faster. It hopefully in the future will reverse how many like day 1 and day 2 patches we require, and fundamentally it liberates a very large number of people from doing a very, very trying task, which is beneath the dignity of humans, I think.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I would also ask is, you used Claude to write a lot of text assets that went into the game. Have you revisited that text, and has your appraisal of it changed?
I've not meaningfully revisited the text, but was reading a large portion of it in real time for the most important encounters, and then just kind of assuming for the less important encounters, is just sort of flavor text rather than the mechanics that someone actually cares about in the small encounter. I was genuinely impressed in the moment with what it came up with several months ago. Not the best D&D session I've ever been in my life, but like clearly above the replacement rate for D&D sessions, likely above the replacement rate for fantasy writing in books that I have paid Amazon good money to get, that are largely written by people that have actual publishers. So it is there.
Okay, this is actually one place where I think I am a bit more bearish on AI than you are, partly because I had much the experience that you were describing. This was sort of how I reacted to. So GPT-4o last year was like this legendarily sycophantic model, and I sort of got sucked into this. And now I can, because these logs are preserved, I can go back to those and say, man, how did this work on me? I guess it's like I've developed the antibodies now. I think that like Nostalgia Braist has what he describes as like the eyeball kick, where it's like you can have phrases that are like highly evocative if you just like tell it, like if the challenge posed to the LLM is like, give me like highly emotionally impactful nouns and adjectives, it will happily compose those. But then after you read like 10 to 50,000 words of that, you realize, oh, all you know how to do is, say everything is a whisper, everything is it's just like if everything is profound, nothing is, and the profundity is like very quickly like lost through repetition. So this is like how, in my interaction with like GPT-4o, I was like amazed on day 1 and then like utterly sick of it by like day 30. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
So all video games implicitly have like a target of playtime and to what degree you are selling someone novelty in the experience versus other things. And so there are people who will play Baldur's Gate, for example, and then replay Baldur's Gate, and et cetera, and varying things, and see different paths of the game. And then there must be a design document somewhere which says either we're developing for that sort of internet weirdo, which I make no claims that I'm not one. Or we're developing for someone who will, in all probability, play for 8 hours and then move on to their next entertainment option. And maybe there's some, mixed strategy for there. With respect to the game that Isekai Game was trying to be, I don't think you get drinking too much Coke levels of satiety before the game is over. I think it genuinely does deliver at least as good as a median D&D experience, but for not having other people at the table. But in terms of story, characterization, allowing you to live your fantasy for a couple hours, it works.
Yeah, do we want to take hands from the audience as we're talking, since we don't really have a specific roadmap for today's conversation?
Thank you. I just want to ask you guys are just now mostly talking in absolute terms about AI's ability to do good writing. Speaking comparatively, do you think writing for video games is a meaningfully easier challenge for AI compared to writing a good novel? Is there a big difference in how early you expect one to be solved compared to the other?
Well, so everything exists in a market, and there are many good novels in the world. And if you think of conspicuously well-written video games, I think a person that has spent a lot of their time playing video games can name 5. I think it's really hard to name 10. And so at least as good as the writing that prevails in the median game that sells 10 million copies, solved problem. And again, a great deal of the writing, even in games that have excellent writing, story, plot, etc., is kind of quotidian. I need a phrase for what Carlac says if you attempt to touch her under the following 36 circumstances, where it is not going to be a heartbreaking work of staggering genius. My authorial intent is, it won't work, but she's not offended. Please spin that out into a line of dialogue for this character. It is a different job as a writer if you are the person that is okay, I have a sense of these characters in the mind. I want them to have a satisfying main arc through the story. I know what my themes are. I know what I want to resonate with the player. I know what beats I want to hit. Versus my job is strictly I have a voice of this character and I need 200,000 words of dialogue from them.
Yeah, I guess if I could sort of give a response to that, I think that this is one place where the hard thing about writing a novel is that there's a lot of characters to fit into your context window. And that is why it is easier to write a coherent paragraph or a coherent page than to write a coherent 100,000 word novel. Now, video games have this unique property in the sense that they aren't actually a single cohesive body of work. They're a collection of many, many different pieces of text that we would call text assets. And in many cases, if you look at video games that are made by human, in a lot of cases, they did not even have the entire project in their head because they were a 20-year-old intern who had the assignment of, here is a spreadsheet. In this column, put the names of 50 fantasy items. Okay, and then in the next column, write a 1 sentence of flavor text about that item. And this is an assignment that ostensibly is the thing that you would expect Claude to be very well qualified to do. And yet, having sort of seen what people do this, so I guess the thing about Idle Manager is that it has a very non-trivial modding community. And so as LLMs became a thing, I got to see the mods that people created with AI generated text, and my initial reaction was wow, this is so cool. And but then I want to say this in a way that's not disrespectful to those people. I think it's, they can obviously continue doing this thing, but when I come back to them, I see all of the LLM isms, and I think okay, this is not something that I would trust as part of my own workflow. All of the relevant caveats about obviously the capabilities of today are not going to be the capabilities of a year from now, but I sort of just pre-registered that having I want to take the outside view on this thing where I've repeatedly had this experience where I'm wowed by what the new model can do, and then 30 days later I'm sick of everything that the model generates. And so based on that, my default is now just to assume that 30 days from now I will feel exactly the same thing about the latest model that I did about the previous one, which is why I'm sort of not. I guess the other thing is I think that there are ways in which you can say that you can get Claude to do the boring part, but I actually kind of like coming up with like 50 like item names and then 50 item descriptions. That's like a fun little task that like, oh yeah, like I do want to sort of like elaborate upon the world here. And then there was also a sense in which like that is like the way in which I discover what the world is about. So I guess like hopefully that is an answer to the question. I realize that most of this is like sort of me giving my subjective value judgment, but I think it's just descriptively true that yes, there are many people who write text assets for video games who are probably going to find LLMs very effective at the thing they want it to be effective at and replacing some amount of human labor, for better or for worse.
I'll say a word that didn't come up in your description just now is placeholder. And these are much, much better placeholders than we've ever had before. Rather than like Iron Sword number 23, it'll be something where if you don't ever replace the placeholder, it is shippable at many like quality levels. And given that much of the game development process starts before you develop the final game, you're trying to do prototypes that, like, is there even any fun in this mechanic? Can these two mechanics be stapled together, et cetera, et cetera? Just the like increased speed at doing prototypes and the increased fidelity of those prototypes, they won't look like Baldur's Gate 3, but they'll be able to have graphics rather than like triangle moves closer to sword. And now think through, after animators get through that, it'll look so cool, guys. They can actually like have some semblance of what you're trying to sell. I think that is transformative for the industry.
I'm going to bring a microphone.
Okay. Yeah, sure thing. So I guess there are two views of like quality of video game or creative works in general. The first is, quality is assessed according to objective standards, fairly static over time. The second view is like quality has something to do with being sufficiently outside modes of distributions. To which extent do you think either view holds more than the other, and like what are the implications of AI consequently?
I have some thoughts on this, but shall I say them while you spin up? I guess, okay, sure. I guess one of the things that has been interesting to see about like the game industry generally is that there is so much, we have so much heterogeneity that like we can now have more homogeneous clusters, if that makes sense, which is to say there are more subgenres than ever, and now within each subgenre, there can exist like 50 different competitors, right? So like in the year like 2014, there was this game called Banished, where it was like a city building game, and now there are basically like probably 20 different games that I would descriptively call Banished clones, where it's like, oh, it's Banished, but instead of a village on the ground, it's a village on an airship. Or it's Banished, but instead of a village on the ground, it's on a walking monster. Or it's Banished, but you can make the buildings 3 stories instead of 1 story. And so I think that there's like a real sense in which, like to your point about like things being outside of distribution, like the truly inspired moments that you have in gaming, I think, are like, people will talk like the first time you played Portal or the first time that you played Outer Wilds. Like, I think that there is a real sense in which, like, I'm not sure if like Claude 6 will ever be able to give you the next, when I say the next Portal, right? Not, Portal 3, but a game that will make you feel the same way that you felt the first time that you played Portal, right? But I think that there's also a tremendous amount of demand for people who say, like, I want my favorite game, except you can build the buildings higher, or it takes place in a different milieu. It's sci-fi instead of fantasy. And so, like, I think that, yeah, those are, like, fundamentally, like, different segments of consumers. Like, one of those categories of game is, like, more likely to win Game of the Year awards, but the other will very happily, find a large constituency of customers who are happy to pay for it because it is exactly like the thing that they already like.
Yeah. My perspective on quality here is not terribly complicated. I think that anybody who seriously considers the question, can games be capital A art, has to come to the conclusion the answer is yes by now. The vast majority of games, not aspiring to that. They are commercial products that are trying to entertain a user for 2 hours. And against that, we will hit that bar in more diversity than we've ever been able to do before, with smaller teams than we've ever been able to do before, and likely a subjectively higher quality level with respect to the assets than we've done before.
Thank you.
Right.
You guys can feel free to call.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh,
I don't know. I think, do we just want to spend the rest of this?
yeah,
time?
we'll just take questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry if I prematurely started that.
No worries.
Thank you. So glad to listen to both of you here. I've been finding as I've been exploring like creating games that I get very excited about like the world and like creating all these things and like the basic functionality. But I realized I was neglecting thinking about the just like the game mechanics like in a very basic way. And I think there's a lot of context shifting required. So I was wondering how, as game developers, you think about this.
My answer for this is that the most recently when I've made games, there's been kind of like purpose first and work from the purpose back to the game mechanics. So Starfighter, kind of quirky, but we were looking for a fiction that would support hard programming problems, and picked finance as that fiction because most players would not have had experience with it. And then we went from that to, okay, what are the interesting problems that fit into the fiction of finance, and then how do we build game mechanics that allow the player to interact with those problems? And so sort of working backwards towards game mechanics. The isekai game worked in the opposite fashion, had like the broad idea, okay, it's going to be D&D with the serial numbers filed off. That gives us these primitives to work with. How do I tell an interesting story within those primitives, and then wire that all together in an extremely aggressive development timeline?
Yeah, I think that something that has really informed my perspective as a video game designer is playing more board games, playing more like tabletop experiences, because there are a lot of things that this experience forces you to do, which is like you kind of have to. So one thing is like when you play a board game, the entire experience is legible to you, right? I think even if you're a video game designer, I almost think that you will learn more from playing board games than you do from playing video games, because every video game is in some sense a black box. There are just so many times when you push a button and it produces an output on the screen, and the mechanism by which that input led to that output is sort of like opaque to the player. And then like this is something like the Civilization games do, is that like by default it will just automate your empire running, and then if you want to, you can like click in and then like manually manage your citizens, but there's like just a huge sense in which like everything runs under the hood. So I think that like board game designs, like if the designer wants a certain, you made an action that causes the deck to be seated in a certain way, it has to instruct the player, reach into the box, find the little envelope that has the bad cards in it, and then shuffle some of those into the consequences deck. And so you will like get to see exactly what the designer is doing. And so like I think like playing board games makes you much more conscious of like those choices. And then also, for example, like here's a thing that can happen sometimes in a video game is this enemy has 300 hit points. You slash it, it loses 2 hit points. This is not something that would ever be tracked in a board game. In a board game, the enemy would have 10 hit points, and you would do 1 hit point would be like a significant thing, right? This is like something that is just because the tracking is because there is like a cost to subtracting hit points in terms of like the amount of labor that you have to perform on the table. You basically like everything becomes much higher consequence, and therefore, again, the design becomes more legible to you. And so what I find myself doing when I play board games is I find myself like thinking through it in those terms. Is like, okay, what is the tangible like tactile experience that I want the user to have when they are like playing this game? Like what when I automate this thing in the video game, what is this? Why is it being automated? Should the player know that this thing is being automated? And if it is, like, how do I make sure that they don't miss the fact that like an important thing is happening as a consequence of the action that they took? And if something is not consequential, then why is it happening at all? I'm not sure if this is actually like speaking directly to the question you asked, but hopefully that was a little bit helpful.
I'll say one more thing about game mechanics is that we should be less precious about pick your favorite verb, copying, stealing, being inspired by other games in the past. In every genre, there are genre conventions that have taught the player how to interact with worlds. And unless you want to spend the majority of your time with the player instructing them on how to play your game, which far too many games seem to want to do, just setting them up with, this is like something you have seen before, and our cool new thing is blah. Also, would encourage more game designers to, if you are exactly like the thing that they know they like, but you've got the cool new thing that is blah, introduce blah early in the story versus like if you play through 72 hours of this clone of many better games that you have played before, you get to our new twist on the genre.
Yeah, I will say also this is something that feels like it has changed. Like the whole like plot twist that you don't discover until 20 hours into the game, I think is like generally a bad idea, right? Because if it's like, oh, it's cliche until it isn't, all the people who were gonna show up for that thing are now disappointed that you pulled the rug out from under them, and all of the people who don't like the cliche and wanted to see you subvert it already left sometime between hours 1 and 19. But I do think that this is like sort of like a tragic thing that we have like sort of lost history, which was like in the year like 2004, you would go to the store, you would spend $50 on a video game, you would take the disc home, you would put it into your console. It would be a while before mom would drive you back to the mall to try out another video game. And so you were just kind of like, well, the sunk cost is going to force me to like see this experience that was designed for me. This is like descriptively just not true of like a video game that is bought now. But if you want to have that experience, you can play a game called Tales of Symphonia, which had a big impact on me when I was a lad.
I think discussed and simultaneously under-discussed among all video game developers is you're not merely competing against every video game, you're competing against every other form of entertainment available to the player. And so relevantly to questions about writing, et cetera, if you're not writing better than Game of Thrones, or at least the Game of Thrones TV show, or at least the Game of Thrones TV show seasons 1 through 5, like competing on the basis of quality writing is like really rough unless you're competing against some hybrid of like gameplay plus better writing than you would typically get in a video game in this genre. Yes?
About video games and writing. Wait. Can you say it so we can hear the microphone?
So sorry.
Yes, all good.
About video games and writing, it's a really interesting question because it feels like the most successful video games have almost comically simple writing. For example, the plot of every Mario game ever is Bowser kidnapped Peach, you have to rescue her, or some variation on that theme. And obviously these games are super successful. And I almost get the impression that video games as a medium make it difficult to convey very complex stories because so much of the plot is in the hands of the player. The player could do this or they could do that, and you have to spin the narrative to accommodate that either way. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think this is certainly true 20 plus years ago when we had just a huge amount of the development of getting Mario to fight Bowser. Kidnapping the Peach was actually like getting Mario to successfully traverse from the left of the screen to the right of the screen. And indeed, that was what we sold to the player as the challenge. Like, it's tough for us to do this. It might be tough for you to do it too. But if you look at like the blockbuster games the last couple of years, many of them actually are pretty good as works of fiction. Baldur's Gate 3, I think mixed opinions on Hades 2, but Hades 1 is one of the best and most moving depictions of a father-son relationship in any media, I would claim. So we are up-leveling with regards to that sort of thing. You are right that since players have agency and can change the order of events in a story and what parts of the world they interact with, that writing a story that is cohesive for all players is a challenge. And indeed, what you see with Baldur's Gate and Hades when you review their developer commentaries is they spent a huge amount of the effort building the system that allows their writers to tell a story that is coherent, basically regardless of the action player in reaching that story. And so you can, you can be a mechanically player at Hades, you can be a mechanically skilled player at Hades, you can like the sword more than you like the crossbow, et cetera, bow rather than crossbow, et cetera, et cetera. But you will still hit the Zag and Hades like story beats in roughly the same order that they expect, and you can choose to like deviate from it a little bit, but they will never not have a complex relationship, and the games that invest in that like it is a tier 1 system in the game, is as important as their animation system is, for example. And then the games that don't invest in it, princess, let's kidnap. We all know how this goes. Let's go to the fun parts.
Yeah, I guess I would sort of invite you to challenge like what percentage of storytelling is actually writing. So I would think about like the first 15 minutes of Up. Does everybody know this is a cultural touchstone? Is that well written? Because here's the thing about the first 15 minutes of Up. There is no dialogue. There is no prose. All of the story is being conveyed through the visuals, and obviously, the characters make certain expressions, but somebody had to make that decision about what expression the characters would make, and then what little beats they'll have. And so I guess like when we think about like, oh, what is good writing in games, we tend to think like, oh, it's good script, good dialogue. When in fact, I would like posit to you that, what is it, Mario 3D World like doesn't have any dialogue, and yet it has a story that if you look at the emotion that is conveyed by the characters' like faces, their animations, you can tell like how Mario is feeling when he sees the little bottle fairy get kidnapped at the beginning, and her distress is obviously evident. So I guess I would like suggest to you that like there's a lot more storytelling that is happening through things that aren't prose and dialogue. The other thing that I would like add to this is that another medium that works with script is, I sort of alluded to, film. And then there's like a story that I remember, except I can't remember who told it or what movie they were telling it, but it's basically a scriptwriter on a podcast who said like, I had this amazing scene that I wrote, and he was like on the set where they were shooting the scene, and he talked to the actor, and the actor who was going to deliver these amazing lines of dialogue that he had written said, I will appreciate the amount of effort that you put into writing this script. It's wonderful that these characters are having this moment on screen, but you're asking me to spend 30 seconds saying words to the camera, and the emotion that this character needs to convey at this moment, I can convey with a single facial expression. And so we're going to strike this from the script. And the writer was furious about this. He quietly sulked, and then he saw the take, and he said, oh, wow, he was right. And so I think that like as somebody who is a writer of dialogue and a writer of prose, there's some times when I have to like trust that like it is kind of like not the job here. I have to like trust the animator to do what they're going to do to convey what the player needs to know for the story to happen. I'm not sure if this is actually speaking to the question that you asked, but hopefully it's like directionally getting at what you're asking about.
I also think underexplored among game designers how like themes and mechanics interact. One of the core themes of Isekai game was agency, including player agency, but also moral agency broadly. And there are a lot of games that destroy player agency early for either convention reasons, or like, let's immediately start by kidnapping someone who's beloved of the player. Player can't do anything about it. Baldur's Gate, excellent game. Baldur's Gate 3, you are literally kidnapped. Baldur's Gate 1, here's your father, by the way, he's dead. I like wanted the opening of the game to be a reaction to that, to have the first outside agency be someone exercising positive moral agency about you specifically, and then you almost immediately getting to make a reaction.
Yeah, do we want to, I guess this brings to mind some things that we said about like theme and gameplay when we had this same conversation 2 years ago, but perhaps we have a different audience this time and I can repeat some of those thoughts. Mm-hmm. So one of the games that I have played that had the biggest impact on me was like a game called Black Closet, and it's basically being like the fascist leader of the student council at like a Catholic school. And so, obviously, like there is a little bit of like black comedy in this whole thing, but like the thing that the writing does that is very intelligent is that it is not like didactic in the way that it is written. Rather, it sort of gives you a given set of incentives and says like, look, you can sort of be a little bit draconian in your disciplinary actions because it will save you time, and time is a precious resource that you simply do not have enough of. And so it's basically like a mystery, right? Every week it's like, uh-oh, there are supplies missing, who stole them? Uh-oh, like somebody snuck out and like didn't lock the door, and so now who needs to be disciplined for sneaking out of the dormitory? And so like one of the cases, this is like procedurally generated, is it's like, the supplies are missing, who stole them? And then you have the experience of like putting people into detention, essentially like interrogating them. You do this very aggressively as you find the deadline approaching. It's like, oh no, we're going to lose credibility if we can't find the thief. And then on day 5, you discover, somebody just misplaced the supplies. That's why they were missing. There was no thief. And this is sort of like a lesson that you can draw from this, right? About like, sometimes when you see the world in a particular way, you see monsters where there weren't monsters, and the game was able to convey this without ever having to lecture me about it in a didactic manner. And so this is like sort of what I try to do in writing Idle Manager, is that there are things that I would say about the business environment. When you are trying to win at capitalism, what happens, right, when you have a financial economic incentive to do one thing and your workers are telling you that they really, really don't like being treated in a particular way, and they really, really don't feel as though they have the energy to do what you are asking of them, you have to make choices. And either way, you will see the consequences of your actions. And a lot of times, if I can just have like a little notification that says, this person got injured and they will not be able to work for the next 3 weeks, that little notification perhaps can sometimes do the work of much more like didactic scene.
I have 2 examples of this in other people's games that worked out very well. Big Pharma game from back in the day. The name already tells you what their take is on the pharma industry. There's a particular level. So the game speaks in a heavy-handed fashion about the creator's take on the ethics of the pharma industry in the main line of the game, but you don't experience it through the mechanics that much, unless you are trying to get the achievements for levels, which require you to get a high score. And there was a particular level where I thought it's a puzzle game. Like, I'm using the right reagents. I have my factory line that is optimally, mathematically provably, it cannot be optimized any more than this. I just cannot get the score that I need on this level. I can't sell enough of my drugs. I have realized the problem. My drug is too effective, and it is curing people. I need to de-optimize the factory line to make it such that it has a high enough cure rating to sell every month, but not a high enough cure rating to destroy its own market. And so that is my Steam review of Big Pharma. 10 out of 10 would abandon business ethics again. The other game that did this, unbelievably bleak and not a headspace I enjoy, but This War of Mine will... Spoiler alerts, wars are bad for everybody. The one thing that happens in the game is you realize that the war is not just something that is happening to you. You are happening to other people. You are part of the problem. There are 2 particular ways, like food is a scarcely limited resource. There's very few places to get food safely. One place is the old people next door who can't fight back. Maybe you avoid that obvious moral trap. Then later in the game, after you've again exhausted all the safe resources, you are raiding a supermarket, and there are some safe resources at the supermarket, and then there's a door. And at the point where my character reached the door, Bruno, the cook at home, was going to bleed out unless I got him bandages. I had found bandages, but it's the same amount of time to explore the rest of the supermarket. There is a door. Behind the door is an innocent getting exposed to the horrors of war. And in any other video game, it's like kick down the door, shoot the bad guy, be the hero, and then collect the resources. This game has told you that that is not a winning strategy. You as the player have to choose, am I the kind of person who opens the door right now and in all probability gets shot for my trouble and Bruno dies at home? Or am I the kind of person who abandons the innocent to the horrors of war and maximizes for getting the bandage back to Bruno on time? And I paused the game and wrestled with my conscience for 20 minutes, and then was like, I'm very sorry, and went back home. And Bruno bled out before I got home. And I don't even think that is scripted. I think that the door is scripted. I think Bruno bleeding out was a die roll, and I was making rational decisions under uncertainty. And I have wrestled at many times over the course of the last 15 years of whether I made the correct decision in a video game. Happier. Yes.
Something that sometimes happens, or
Excuse me,
they
sorry.
often in video games, there'll be a moral choice, and both choices will have meaningful mechanical outcomes. So maybe
do you save this person? And it's like, oh, if you don't save them right now, you get some immediate stuff. But if you do save them, there's like a payoff later. And my question is along the lines of, in theory, mechanical rewards could reinforce like I'll say moral lesson. That's a certain way of framing it. But mechanical rewards could reinforce a moral lesson, or they could probably also subvert a moral lesson where people aren't even thinking about it morally. They're thinking of it, well, do I want a reward later or do I want a reward now? Which is may or may not be the point of the moral question. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I intentionally for Isekai game, the game screams at you that as you're going towards the plague town, like, you've got a quest. The quest goes that way. This is a distraction from the quest. You will very likely die. This is not a place of honor. Why are you still going? And then I think a lot of genre-savvy players were like, obviously I meant to go into this, which as a game designer, obviously you are meant to go into it, but it's canonically like the wrong thing to do for your character. And the optimal path through Plague Town results in a lot of people dying. You are causationally the reason that not everybody dies, and somebody else gets the credit. And a lot of people were like, this is unsatisfying. Like, I did all the right things, and the government screwed me. And then people still died. And I'm like, you have learned the lesson of Plague Town. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that like there are games that, and this may be what you're talking about, where BioWare game is where you have good boy points and bad guy points. And if you do the virtuous thing, then you become more like a Jedi. And if you do the evil thing, then you get to shoot Force lightning at people. And I think that this is sort of like rob the moral lesson from the story, because it's like, well, the reason that I was acting this way is because I like that part of the talent tree better. I do think that like part of what like the moral quandaries that I sort of like to create for the player are the ones where you are optimizing for something other than like the utilitarian resource. And I think that this is like something that players intuitively understand, that like they're not just trying to beat the game and maximize the resource, right? You see this like people say, I'm going to beat the game with a party of like 6 white mages because that's just like interesting to me, right? Or it's like, I'm picking this character because I like this aesthetic. I'm picking this armor because I like this aesthetic. And so like, I guess what I would say is that like, if anything, attaching a cost to the choice that they in some sense see as more desirable for moral or aesthetic reasons is a way of saying like, yes, I strongly believe in this so much that I'm willing to give up a prize for it, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to save the little sister because I know that there will be a goodie basket waiting for me if I behave like a good boy. I guess
I will say legibility is an important feature of game design, and one reason that we go for, are you making like the +3 good choice or the -2 evil choice, is because some players don't read all that well, and some players do not have a sophisticated understanding of what characters are thinking. And so in, for example, Baldur's Gate, like the authors of the game have a choice to tell you, like, Karlach approves, Shadowheart disapproves. It does not take a genius in social dynamics on like whether Shadowheart approves or disapproves of like early in the game, betraying the tieflings or whatever. But there are a lot of players who don't sufficiently have a model for how people think, such that they decided, no, we want to make it very explicit every time this happens, so that players get the reinforcement of like, if you care about Shadowheart approval, you know what she likes. And partly that like helps players quickly get a model for this person that they might not understand through just what she said in their interactions with her. And partly it is because there is like a portion of the player base that really doesn't know if they did the good thing unless you put like good guy points +2 right after the action. And that is what it is.
Yeah, I do recall this like being something that people encountered in a certain question Dragon Age, where it's like, it wasn't clear to me which is the good guy choice and which is the bad guy choice, because you could make the case for either one. And it's like, perhaps that was the designer's intent, but also you are playing a BioWare game, so it's like reasonable for you to have that expectation.
Yeah. There were some morally ambiguous moments in the isekai game, including during the Plague Town thing, and at least a few that were designed to challenge players in that there are like doing the mechanically optimal thing would require you to do something that some but not all players would find extremely distasteful, some people remonstrated to me about that. I'm like, one, authorial intent. Two, read the story of Vaccinate CA if you want to know why.
Yeah, I guess to just elaborate on this point a little bit more, I do think that there is like something that you can do for players, which is like, why do players like doing the evil thing? And it's like kind of the same reason that they like getting into mischief. Like, why does Gordon Freeman jump around during the cutscene when the players are the character NPCs are talking to him? Because the player was bored and was mashing the space bar. But like, there is a certain kind of player impulse that is not even like necessarily I want to do the Sith aligned thing, but it's just like I want to try to pull one over on the game. I want to get it. I want to feel like I'm getting away with something. And so I think that like there are ways in which you can like make people feel like they have done something clever, and then sometimes you get to embed a moral message in that. Like
there was one achievement in the game for evil squared. Like there was one option I assumed that nobody would go for, and after you go for it, an enabler in the encounter says, "Well, if you're already doing that, I mean, why don't you go a few astronomical units past it?" And I'm like, clearly no one is going to get evil squared. And indeed, almost everyone who went evil was like, evil squared, exactly what I want right now. Including, it was a conference held at Lighthaven, so I assume like many people there have deep ethical thoughts. But perhaps part of the space of video games is being able to do the evil squared things without, say, killing all the plague patients in real life to stop the spread of the disease.
I believe we have 8 minutes to the top of the hour, so shall I leave the audience with, I guess, one more anecdote? Or
Please go ahead.
All right. So this is to the point about the player feeling clever and then hopefully maybe feeling a little bit guilty afterwards. One of the things that can happen in Idle Manager is that the people that work, the talents that work under you can bully each other. And obviously, there's like a very straightforward solution, which is that you separate the bully from the victim. And one way you can do this is by firing the bully, right? That is a straightforward thing that you can do. And it is one that is sort of like subtly encouraged by like various UI choices. But another thing that you can do is get rid of the victim. And there is a Discord conversation, which I have saved and will perhaps frame one day, which is somebody observed like, my ace was like bullying somebody, and like this person is like responsible for like 40% of my revenue. I'm not going to get rid of my ace, and so I really have this human resources problem in which I just need to make sure that these people aren't put in the same work environment together, and so sayonara, sorry you did nothing wrong, but we're trying to run a business here. And I think that this maybe teaches you something about the way that the world operates and why it is that serial harassers can sometimes get away with it for disturbingly long periods of time.
I was worried that Discord was going to come up with a solution on we simply need a rotating stream of victims here.
Okay, I think we have to call it for now because we're going to start the next event here soon. Let's all give a round
Thanks
of
very much for
applause
coming,
our
everyone.
Speakers. Will you guys do office hours anywhere, or you'll be mingling?
I am going to be on my way to Bay's Attic to talk about YouTube, but I would be happy to talk with people about the things that I've talked to Bay at any point throughout the weekend.
Yep, and I'm here throughout the rest of the weekend as well. Happy to chat with anybody.
Thanks for coming.